Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we're discussing a limited edition of 175 pieces launched in late 2021 for the 2022 model year. This is the NOMOS Autobahn Director's Cut A7 model. So this is effectively the director's cut or preferred interpretation of the watch as dictated by original NOMOS Autobahn designer Werner Eislinger. So this is both his vision of the watch in its unadulterated pure form and a tribute to the German motorway A7, part of the Autobahn network. It all makes sense. The original Autobahn was launched in 2018, and this is an evolution of that, but dimensionally they're identical. So this watch in steel is 41 millimeters in diameter, 10.7 millimeters thick. It measures 49.8 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, and if we're going to measure the rigid outcropping of the bracelet, it actually projects slightly beyond the case. The total distance across the wrist here is 51.3 millimeters, and it has a universal 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We're going to zoom out a little bit, put the watch on my wrist. My wrist is 16 centimeters in circumference. You get a good sense of how it wears. It will be sized down, and you have quite a few sizing increments, but once it is properly sized, I would recommend this watch for a wrist of 15 centimeters circumference or larger. It's a little bit difficult to simulate the exact fit because of the rigidity of the bracelet when it's not sized, but you can see that it definitively does not project beyond the edges of my wrist, so the lugs do not go beyond the edges of my wrist. It's also a very thin watch. At under 11 millimeters thick, it easily slides underneath the cuff. So 15 centimeters circumference wrist or larger. Now the bracelet is a curious thing because at first you see it's got this punched out metal design reminiscent of the Breitling Air Racer, but then past that segment, which is rigid and curved, we have many individual removable links that can be used for fine-tuning the size. And you can see underneath, those screws remove the links, and so every single one of those is sizable. We also have 3 pairs of divots drilled inside the clasp, so you can use your strap tool to change the anchoring point of the bracelet and thus fine-tune the fit. It's a combination of satination, media blasting, and a few polished accents. It is a twin trigger release clasp, so it will not pop open automatically. This is a sports watch, so having a clasp that requires positive displacement of triggers to open is good for a sports watch owner. And it's nice and thin in profile when closed with a curved inner chassis to wrap around the underside of your wrist. The case is all of high polish. The bracelet terminal link is high polished. My favorite detail here is just how smoothly integrated the lug is into the case. The lug definitely has its own separate form, but it's not stepped out like a longa lug. It's somewhere between the full integral lug profile of something like a Calatrava and the dramatic straight line profile that you would get on something like a Breguet, where the lug projects almost perpendicular out of the case flank. You can also see that it is a backloader and a monoblock case, as the bezel and the case are all one piece. Everything loads through the back dial and movement. You can also see that the bezel, which is angled, is very narrow and barely there. Also that the bezel width and the lug width when viewed from the top are almost exactly identical for design's sake. We have a minimally branded polished NOMOS style crown, and the watch, though 100 meters water resistant, does not include a screw down crown. Let's do a quick loom shot here. The Autobahn, true to its name, is designed to look like the dashboard of an automobile. Remember the old electroluminescent Chrysler displays of the 60s? Very much like that. And when you operate the mechanism, you can see that we have a minute hand with a loomed tip and then a shorter, stubbier, fully loomed hour hand that's actually a different color than the sweep of loom on the dial. And also note that that sweep of loom is broken up so that it doesn't include the bottom of the dial, as the bottom of an automotive speedometer or tachometer, of course, would not be calibrated. All right, back to the world of the living. You can see that this is the A7 design. There were 3 of these NOMOS Autobahn Director's Cut models, named for different motorways in Germany. Here we have a reference not so much to the Autobahn, but to the great banked racetracks of the interwar era. You could see in the banked profile of this somewhat concave dial the banks of Monza, Brooklands, and Indianapolis. And then we have radially arrayed numerals, as you often find on speedometers and tachometers, and there's the same dished concave profile for the sub-seconds register. We also have a number of different colors, as we have orange, we have yellow, we have blue, we have white, and then we have polished silver. And then there are a couple of subsidiary setting modes, one of which is a quick set for the date. And by the way, it is bi-directionally quick settable, which is a fun feature. Pull the crown out all the way. Now you stop the balance. We've activated hacking seconds. We can set the watch precisely to a reference time. Flip it all over. You can see the DUW 6101 movement, which actually came out in the original Autobahn in 2018. Now at NOMOS, when you have a movement with the name of a Greek letter, that means it's a NOMOS in-house movement, but it's not their proprietary assortment. When you have Deutsche Uhrenwerke, or DUW, that means it uses NOMOS' swing system, which is a combination of a high-grade balance, hairspring, and an escapement, the lever and the wheel both. It's functionally identical to what you'd buy from Swatch Group, for example. The key thing is NOMOS spent its own money to make such a setup, and very few brands can build hairsprings, much less balances and escapements. NOMOS builds all four. It's regulated using an Edicron system for beat error and fine adjustment, which I like because Edicron allows for very precise regulation. It's a bi-directional winder with a 42-hour power reserve. It has the stop seconds, the quick set date. It pivots on 27 joules. It's adjusted in 6 positions, which is one more than a standard chronometer. And it beats away at 4 hertz or 8 beats per second. And it also features a full balance bridge. You can see it's anchored on both sides, giving better resistance to shock than you'd have with a single-sided balance cock. It's also quite thin, being broad enough to fill this case back, but only 3.2 millimeters thick, so quite thin and fine. You can see that it features stripes, engine turning on the base plate. It has fire-blued screws, and then a number of polished elements, including the center ball bearing, as well as the core of the crown wheel. This is a handsome watch inside and out, resolutely automotive themed, now automotive named. It is the Autobahn and the tribute to the Autobahn A7, all in this 2022 limited edition NOMOS Autobahn Director's Cut A7. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.